This resulted in just a couple of years of a complete reversal of fortune, where the colonies were completely debt-ridden, poverty, high unemployment, people out on the streets. In fact, in his biography, Franklin said, "The colonies would gladly have borne a little tax on tea and other matters had it not been that England took away from the colonies their money, which created unemployment and dissatisfaction. The inability of the colonists to get the power to issue their own money permanently out of the hands of George III and the international bankers was the prime reason for the Revolutionary War." Most of us in our history books learned that it was because of taxes. Franklin, who was there, says no, it wasn't because of taxes, it was because they took our money away. So, after the Revolutionary War, actually leading up to it, the colonies were just, all their gold was over in England because they had used it to pay their taxes. And so they were forced to print their own paper money again, but this time it didn't quite work out so well, because the nice thing with colonial script was that there was just enough to supply the needs of moving products. So the circulation of this script during the war rose from 12 million to 500 million, and in fact shoes sold for $5,000 a pair. Wouldn't you like to own one of those? Washington said of it that a wagon load of money will scarcely purchase a wagon load of supplies. So things were really bad financially for America at the end of the Revolutionary War. So what this did was led to the perfect conditions, which were very similar to the conditions in England before the creation of the Bank of England. And the Continental Congress drew up a plan and allowed Robert Morris in 1781 to establish the first, or the Bank of North America. And it was modeled closely after the Bank of England. And what was interesting though is the charter for the bank called for $4,000 to be deposited into the bank's coffers as its reserves. But Morris, he used his political influence, if you will, and had the United States deposit gold lent to it from France, and used that money through the fractional reserve lending purpose to give to his friends to purchase their shares into the Bank of North America. So in other words, I didn't actually put any money into it, but I own a great deal of it. And the shareholders, the stockholders, they were never ever revealed. Let's see. Yeah, the currency value continued to plummet, and as a result, 4 years later, the bank's charter was not renewed. Things just didn't quite work out for it. Now, this was a very heated debate at the time of the Constitutional Convention, because you had people like Robert Morris and also Alexander Hamilton, who was tutored under Morris, arguing, we can't put anything in the Constitution that gives Congress the express authority to print paper money. We can't do that. It has to be silenced on it. But there's some really good quotes from Jefferson here that said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations which grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. I sincerely believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. What do we have today? We have a privately owned central bank. Exactly what he was saying we should not have. Now there was another gentleman by the name of Gouverneur Morris who was also tutored under Robert Morris, the head of the Bank of the Bank of North America, excuse me. But he kind of learned from his ways, and he said that the rich will strive to establish their dominion and enslave the rest. They always did. They always will. They will have the same effect here as elsewhere if we do not, by the power of government, keep them in their proper spheres. So this was a big issue, like I was saying, in forming the Constitution. But unfortunately, those who did not want to have this express power given to Congress won out, and the Constitution Constitution is silent on the matter. It does mention the printing, or not printing, but is the Congress has the right to give out or control the regulation of gold and silver coin, but it doesn't say anything about paper money. Sorry, I'm kind of stuttering a little bit. And just a few years after that, the very first Secretary of the Treasury, his name was Alexander Hamilton, already mentioned him earlier, he introduced a central bank bill. And in 1790, that very same year, Amschel Rothschild, the patriarch of the Rothschild family, said, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes its laws." Interesting that it happened in the same year, but I'll let you decide that. So the first Bank of the United States was authorized in 1791. It was given a 20-year charter. 80% stock was owned by the private investors and 20% was owned by the United States. But just as with the Bank of North America, this wasn't to give the United States a share in the action, if you will. It was to supply the original capital, which was then loaned out through fractional reserve lending to the other shareholders so that they could purchase their shares in the bank. Same scheme, just repeated again. Let's see, the name of the investors again were never revealed. It was a common saying that the Rothschilds were the power behind the old Bank of the United States. So what happened after this bank was enacted? Well, you had over the first 5 years, the U.S. government borrowed $8.2 million. Over the same 5-year period, prices rose by 72%. And in 1811, a bill was put before Congress to renew the first Bank of the United States. But the debate was heated, and some even claimed that Nathan Rothschild, if you remember from Waterloo fame, said that if the bank's charter was not renewed, that there would be disastrous consequences. Well, the charter was not renewed, and 5 months later, the War of 1812 started. It ended in 1814 for non-history buffs, mainly because the British were also busy with Napoleon, realizing that, okay, this dude is still a problem. So, 2 years after the War of 1812 ended, Congress passed another bill permitting the Second Bank of the United States. This was in 1816. Its charter was a duplicate of the First Bank of the United States, a 20-year charter. And the government, again, paid their shares up front. You think they would have learned after the first 2 times, but they didn't. Same thing went on. The investors' names were never revealed, but it is known that about one-third of all the shares, which was the largest block, was owned by foreign banks, foreign corporations, if you will. And so it's no stretch to say that the Second Bank of the United States was as deeply entrenched in the United States or in England as it was in the United States. And some even claim that the Rothschilds were directly responsible and in control of both the Bank of England at this time and the Second Bank of the United States. So you fast forward a little bit and you have Andrew Jackson. Now, for those of you who don't know, all Andrews are apparently supposed to have a vicious widow's peak. A little attempting humor. He was the hero of the Battle of New Orleans, and he was a staunch opponent of the bank. He wanted to kill the bank. There's some great quotes that I won't get into today, but call them vipers and things like that. But he was elected in 1828, and in his first term of office, he really wanted to root out corruption, especially corruption with those who were related to the banking interests. So he fired 2,000 of the 11,000 federal employees. That's pretty cool, I think. But anyway, so the bank wanted to kind of test him, and before his first term was up, they sought to get a renewal bill through in 1832, and Congress passed it, and it got sent to Old Hickory, as he was known, Andrew Jackson. And he said no. He vetoed it, and at the time, Congress was unable to override his veto. But in his veto message, and this is kind of lengthy, but really good, I think.